two of our leaders have been able to put together a business case and a business case model, Zoe, that actually creates a return of investment predominantly based on non-tangible benefits, community, environment, sustainability, water security, where previously those things weren't factored into a business case. Previously it was pretty much dollar for dollar, it was a financial conversation. And now moving to those intangibles and that environmental community has allowed an organisation to put value within the business case, within their sustainability goals or their community goals for that investment decision. And that's what's been the most exciting part for us, is that it's not just about a sense of costing a dollar and how much money do we get back for that dollar, but the bigger holistic view.
Hi, Smart Community friends. In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I have a wonderful conversation with David Catalovski and Limnios. Now, you might remember David from way back in episode 140, which was in 2019 in the before times. Now, David is the co-founder of Green Bee, and Lewis is the Chief Customer Officer and Director of Nucleus 3. Now, I've got them on the podcast together today because they're working on some really interesting projects in the area of IoT, the Internet of Things, community engagement, and smart management of resources, such as water, waste, and energy. After telling us about their companies and what they're each passionate about, David, Lewis, and I discussed the importance of measuring more than the things that have traditionally been measured when making investment decisions as a local government or organisation, plus the challenges and rewards of being a pioneer using IoT for smart resource management. David and Lewis tell us about the trends in the projects they've been working on, including councils working together to leverage data for interoperable customer engagement, and how opening the conversation to the community not only gets more people at the table, but also helps find new use cases for the IoT data. We finish our chat talking about how we are finally getting away from the mentality that deploying something is enough and moving towards using data to measure outcomes and deliver better solutions, plus the emerging issue of data security for councils. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, David, and hello, Lewis. I'm so excited to have you both on the podcast. Now, David, you've been on the podcast before, and I was having a look. It was episode 140, which we're at over 300 episodes now, so it was quite a while ago, back in 2019. Wow. And Lewis, this is your first time on the podcast, so excited to have you. Okay, we're going to jump in. David, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're passionate about?
Sure. It's great to be back on. I've got to say time certainly flies. It only seems like yesterday. I guess COVID is the blur between those timelines. Yeah, so my name is David Catalovski. I'm co-founder of Green Bee. We are a solution for government utilities across water and energy that connects with smart metering and sensor data, basically IoT, and we use that data to generate real-world outcomes in terms of water usage, energy usage, behaviours of residents and citizens, and that's what we're most passionate about achieving.
Awesome. And Lewis, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell us about your background and what you're passionate about?
Firstly, thank you, Zoe, for the opportunity. Pretty exciting for me. Nucleus 3, we started in 2016 with the passion of all things operational technology and IoT. My passion is digitising water authorities and regional councils to better engage with the community and ensure precious resources like water is better managed and we have security for the future. So really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, now you're both on the podcast together because obviously we know in the smart community space that we have to work together, like interoperability, etc. So I was really keen, and I think David, when we first reached out, you were suggesting that we have Lewis on the podcast as well, because we know that you're working together, I guess, to have a full solution. Now, before we dive into that in a bit more detail, let's go broad. And David, we'll start with you. But what is a smart community to you?
The smart community to us is a community that has largely a lot of services and data that are digitized, that are delivering value to its customers. And I guess by customers, from a community perspective, we're really looking at citizens and residents and stakeholders. Where do we derive value from the services that we're putting forward to the community? And where we sort of play in that is in the data side of things, where we're setting up advanced metering infrastructure or IoT sensors, and obviously connecting that back to the customer or to the actual citizen, and how they can obviously make their lives better, be more sustainable, more water efficient, perform positive behaviors, and participate in programs that will hopefully improve their experience within the community.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Lewis, how about you? What is a smart community to you?
Flexibility, having interoperability around technology and different vendors to meet a need or a use case for that community or that council, that organisation. And, at the forefront of everything is the community and how to better engage that community around water, around data, around parks, around rubbish collection, about all things within there, improving the better of quality of life. And I think interoperability around technology plays a big part. Historically, we've always been caught up, it's only one solution must fit. However, the times are changing, and big tier ones, small tier twos, or technology companies must need to work together to meet the outcomes of the customer. So that's something that we're looking forward to working with David. And one of the things that we've learned around interoperability that a lot of technology companies didn't have was keeping the community first. And David's organisation and offering through the Green Bee platform really allowed us to close that loop and really create that 360 view within a community. So that's what we believe.
No, I like that. And been doing work with councils, and that's definitely a big kind of theme or topic, or something it's not emerging per se, but it's growing. And particularly regional councils or people I'll be talking to, it's like, that best of breed language rather than just like a big platform that does absolutely everything, because it may serve may work really well for one aspect, say, I don't know, asset management, but actually for fleet management, it's no good. Or for water, water data integration, it doesn't have that element, or it may have it, but it's not exactly what we need. So you actually have to do a whole bunch of manual things as well. So it's not actually suiting those needs. Whereas actually, if you have, the best of breed in for different elements, as long as we can bring those together, and you've got those, I don't want to use technical terms in case people don't know, but you bring that data together that then can make decisions, and then that user interface both for the community, but then also the people working within, say, if we're talking about a council, for example, can actually get the data they need and make decisions with it. And that flow is so important. And I know we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. So let's go there now. So maybe, I don't know how we want to run this, but David, if you want to start, I'm keen to hear about some of the projects and things that you've been working on. And we can just kind of go between yourself and Lewis. But actually, before we go there, just to remind people, obviously people can go back and listen to your podcast in whatever episode did I say, 140, quite a while ago now. I'm sure you've done lots of things since then. But give us a bit of a 101 on Green Bee, and Lewis, I'll get you to do the same for Nucleus 3, and then we can talk about how they integrate together.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So obviously, as IoT and advanced metering infrastructure has really started to evolve, when we first started out about 10 years ago, there wasn't all that much IoT or sensors or advanced metering infrastructure that existed across utilities or across local government. And, that has really started to ramp up now in terms of unlocking a lot of the value that advanced metering infrastructure and digital meters and digital sensors can provide to government and to utilities. So I guess we've always had a track record of being really early, which is great. but also means that, you're talking to customers and clients that aren't really there yet or aren't ready for it or don't have the resources internally in terms of the organization to really know how to unlock a lot of those things. So we've really been at the forefront with Greenbee in terms of our solutions around the sort of local government side, in terms of using data and customer data and how you can deliver outcomes in terms of real world outcomes that are linked back to digital programs, and also taking that theme and marrying it up to actual usage data across, household water, household energy, and how you can go about influencing customer behaviors and their water efficiency or energy efficiency by gamifying that experience, using things like points and rewards to shift behaviors during certain periods of time. And I guess we're very fortunate to have worked with some of the leaders in those projects and deployments that we've had. And I guess there's been a fair amount of research and research papers that have come out of those projects. We're actually delivering hard data in terms of savings or behaviors or whatever the case may be. I think where we are today is beyond our approach 10 years ago when we'd launched something and we'd tick a box and everyone would have a celebration and would go to the pub. That deploying something in the field, getting it in the hands of customers is really the first step. You haven't really achieved anything until you're actually delivering the outcomes that you set out to do, and they're actual measurable outcomes. So for us, in linking our solution back to sensor data and IT data and the granularity that gives you, you're actually able to really look at people's patterns of behavior and how they actually behave, whether they're in the home or outside of the home, and how they interact. And that's really, really important because you don't really know whether you're achieving what you set out to achieve without that data. And that's what power of, smart cities or smart government really gives us today. And it's something that people really need to focus on is the ocean.
Yeah, I agree. I think being able to, like you said, launching the app or whatever the project, in this case an app, but launching that and getting it out there is step one. And then there's so many other steps, and that measuring and monitoring is so important. And even if it's not any project, that needs to be the case. But we've really started, I think, the smart community approach has really started embedding that, which is really key. And it's that next level of maturity. But also, you have to be able to do that. You have to set up the data to be able to do that. And when it's a specific data project, you would hope it makes, it's clear that that's what you're going to do. But then you want to embed the same things in other projects that we're doing as well. So you actually can set up that data in the first instance. And it's something I'm having a lot of conversations with councils about now as well, is, they may have deployed some technology, but they don't actually know, on a flip side, they've got all this data, but they don't know what to do with it. And so then it's so there's so many different streams. It's not just data. Now we've got the thing. There's so many things that need to go into that planning of how that's going to work, how you're going to measure and monitor, who's going to do that, how then that's going to feed into decision making. There's so many other things that are feeding into that, which is some of the stuff you were talking about there, which I think is so key. And it's the only way that we're actually going to see real results in this space and be able to actually have that benefits realization, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Lewis, tell us about Nucleus 3.
Yes, Nucleus 3, born 2016, after spending myself a number of large SDIs and being involved in the smart meter deployment in Victoria, I saw a great opportunity to take the lessons learned from that program and the good, the bad and the ugly of that program, and try to establish a business that focuses on the convergence of IoT. We was at a point where technology was moving to be more engaging with customer, and we saw the explosion of the iPhone and the connectivity of the internet and 4G, etc. And throughout the journey, we've worked on both sides of the fence. We've worked representing the customer and working with vendors and identifying technologies and processes to deploy and better improve operations, to responding to a customer and working with an ecosystem of partners to meet the needs. And what we've been able to do, Zoe, we don't sort of lock ourselves away exclusively to one vendor or another. We try to be flexible. We have a model that we call the N360 model, which is a 360-degree value offering, and we actually work with multiple network providers or device partners or sensor manufacturers to, when we look at the customer's requirements, we actually go, what is best for that customer? And what we try to do is create a solution that is, we call it plug and play, like plumbing, because it's water, but it's a plug and play approach where, depending on the need of that customer or that council or that organisation, they pick the solution like we do for a mobile phone. If you grab a mobile phone and put a SIM card in, it just works and it knows how to operate and what to do and how that data is configured. And what we've been able to try to do is bring in multiple systems to create what we call a single pane view of operationalised data, where all these data can come from asset management or SCADA, the IoT sensors or the meters, to be able to be operationalised. And the exciting bit of the journey we've been on is, when we first started, Zoe, we were talking a lot with the engineers and the SCADA engineers and the IT departments on how to deploy these things. And over the journey and working with David and bringing in, closing the loop off with customer and community, we've now got engagement with the marketing department, the customer relations department, the Indigenous or the community awareness teams. And all of a sudden now at that table, when we are talking about digitising, it's not a technology discussion anymore. And that's the exciting bit about it all, is that you're seeing how can this benefit quality of life, quality of health, sustainability, environment, and so on. And that's been it really came to the forefront when we had an issue late last year, when we had some social media platforms that were not behaving well in Australia regarding having access to their sites being available to the community. And we remember during those couple of days, people were ringing us going, can we use, IoT and Greenbee to engage with our customers? And we were absolutely, they're like, so that means we could finally own the customer. Yes. And that was the exciting bit, Zoe, that the councils and the local government authority had a sense of control of the data that the consumer was producing within their own environments, that they were able to communicate back. So for us, it's about creating a service offering that drives outcomes and digitises an organisation through data-driven decision-making.
And I really like what you said there around, once you started thinking, or once, you started engaging from that customer lens, how many other people got seats at the table, and then how different the conversation was as well, because that's so important. And also, from a marketing and storytelling perspective, that's actually what you need to engage the community and to get the funding, to get the momentum, to get the leaders excited about it, right? You actually need to have conversations around the customer, because that's what they care about. And that's what that's the objective. That's what the corporate plans say. That's what the community plans say. So actually integrating that together is so important.
Yeah. And let's not forget, the customer's the one that's actually paying for it at the end of the day.
100%. We're serving the public, right? That's
Absolutely.
why we're doing this.
And to be honest, David and I have been through this with our team, and we've got an extremely strong team. Two of our leaders, Michael McFarlane and Mike Wassell, have been able to put together a business case and a business case model, Zoe, that actually creates a return of investment predominantly based on non-tangible benefits: community, environment, sustainability, water security, where previously those things weren't factored into a business case. Previously it was pretty much dollar for dollar. It was a financial conversation. And now moving to those intangibles and that environmental community has allowed an organisation to put value within the business case, within their sustainability goals or their community goals for that investment decision. And that's what's been the most exciting part for us, is that it's not just about a sensor costing $1 and how much money do we get back for that dollar, but the bigger holistic view. And that's what is sort of driving us to work more closely with Greenbee. And Greenbee's product has enabled us to now have the most important data set in the community and that ability to communicate.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think some of those, intangibles, being able to measure those. And again, I think it's like having the awareness and the focus on them, then you get more people at the table to input even to how to measure those things and that type of thing as well. So it's all like this kind of, snowball effect of when you start to focus on it, then more people are talking about it. Then you've got more ideas that then how you can measure it. Then you can show the return on investment. So then it kind of works together in this like kind of, this ecosystem of creating value, which is essentially what we're trying to do. And at the end of the day, we want to make our communities more accessible, livable, and sustainable for all. And that's not always going to have a hard dollar of, you're saving this, so therefore that. Some things might be like that, but actually you're by improving quality of life, you're opening up opportunities. Like water security is a huge one, right? We don't it's fine now while we're able to turn on our taps, but how much does that cost when you cannot turn on your tap anymore? At what level is it, that level of risk is really, really key. And if you can start talking about things in those terms, obviously that may not be a community conversation. There's a different story or different language you want to be able to use, or a narrative rather. It's still the same information, but different narrative. But the decision makers need to be focusing on those things, because at the end of the day, the community needs to be able to turn on the tap, right?
Yeah, you make an interesting point there. We work with a customer, one of our customers in New Zealand, and it's deploying the Green Bee Nucleus solution within their environment. And in the first 2 devices that we connected, we identified 50 litres of leaking per 4 hours or something. It worked out to like the size of an Olympic swimming pool per week being lost in those 2 premises. And it's interesting when you visualise it like that to a homeowner, and then they realise the amount of loss of water in a visual swimming pool type of context. It's amazing how that behaviour of water changes. People are a bit more conscious about turning the tap off, in the garden, or not leaving the nozzle on, or how they're washing the car. And what we're trying to do is make people appreciate and be grateful for the resource we've got, if that's electricity, gas, or water, whatever natural resource is that we're tracking or managing or deploying. It's not a given right to turn the switch on and have power, or turn the tap on and have clean, beautiful drinking water, or having gas for heating. And when people understand that connection between that resource and their behaviour and being able to change that, it's a really powerful message in the community, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, David, keen to get your thoughts as well, I guess, thinking about like some of the changes that you've seen in customers as well. Yeah. But for me, like thinking about resources, for example, obviously that can have direct impact on people's quality of life, but also, like you said, it's like nurturing our precious resources as we move into having to do more with less and all those type of things. But I think there's going to be a point and where similarly, like with sustainability, it was a term we all knew, it was talked about, etc. But then when policy started changing hard and fast, where it was like, no, you need to measure emissions, etc., we're going to get more and more of that in terms of accountability of what data we need to collect and how we use it. And I think getting on the front foot, as we said, we talked about being the early adopters, which is, pioneering is hard. But at the end of the day, then you're there and you're pushing and you're creating change and shaping that change. But there will be a point where we will have to do, it won't be like, oh, this is really great, this is nice to have, I'm so glad we did this is a really innovative project. It'll be like, oh, no, we really need to do this because it's written in policy or legislation. And we don't necessarily want to have to wait for that. But I do feel like in this smart community thing, it's not just like, oh, that's all the smart stuff over there. It's how we integrate it in, because it is a necessary requirement. It's not a nice to have anymore as we move into this world, right?
Yeah, look, I guess that's one of the difficult things around, Australia and sort of talking about smart communities and smart utilities and smart municipalities, smart water authorities. We have examples overseas where sensors and smart metering are largely the norm, and we're talking about, in the millions and in the tens of millions and years of data, where we are in terms of some of our projects and scales, we're in the tens of thousands. And I guess as these things become the norm for us as consumers and customers, we're going to say, well, why didn't we have this before? Or, the future generations are going to say, well, this is normal. Of course, I can track my energy usage on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, or my water usage on an hourly basis, or even on a 30-minute interval basis. That granularity of data is just something that hasn't really existed over the last sort of decade up until now. And we're really creating the future in terms of IoT and sensors to allow us as humans and as communities to better manage our resources. And I guess as that wave comes, it's going to become the future of what we have around us to, as you sort of said, using the carbon emissions sort of example, we're going to have that kind of data at our fingertips. It's not a question of if, it's more a question of when we will have that. And the people that are on the wrong side of that argument are just going to be wrong in the future as we measure kind of everything, particularly around our resources that are so important to our daily lives, namely water and energy. And as the cost and supply of those things becomes vital from so many different sort of perspectives. So I think that, it's still sort of early on, but that wave is just building momentum at the moment. And eventually sort of my kids and future sort of generations, of course, we're going to be able to open up an application and see how much water we used sort of yesterday and how we can better manage that. And look, if you're able to multiply that into the millions, there's significant sustainability and efficiency savings that you can generate to hopefully say, well, we don't need to build a new dam because we're able to manage a lot of those efficiencies through software. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit. And, the energy industry has been doing this for a really long time in terms of managing the grid through customer applications and using things such as demand management and behavioral demand response, controlling people's air conditioners at times when there's peak load. You can apply those learnings to so many different behaviors across the sort of landscape. It's a really exciting time. As a technologist, we love building these kinds of solutions and seeing the kinds of impacts that you can make on people's behaviors and actually get into their home and somehow shift their behaviors and have that ingrained. That's the real fun stuff for us. And I think for government, that should be the aim, is like, let's just get out of each other's way and actually focus on the outcomes that really matter, not simply just ticking a box and say we deployed something. How many people use it? I don't know. What were the outcomes that we generated? I don't really know. Well, let's really look at the hard data and see where we're failing and how we can do better. And through some tweaks, we might get there.
And it's about nudging, right? And it's about providing information. It's not actually about really at this stage, we're not forcing anyone to do anything, but we're providing the information. We're providing the nudges, the incentives to actually shift and change, which, I think that's so powerful. I mean, you say similar things with nudging transport, mode shift and all those type of things as well. It seems like to get, it's a hard thing to do, but all those things add up, and providing people with information, because a lot of the time, and particularly, and I don't necessarily think it's just younger generations, we're probably just talking about it more, but we want to use our resources most effectively. I think 95% of the population want to do that, right? But we want the information there. We want to know, is it this or that? If I use my, vacuum cleaner at this time, is it better than that time? I don't know now, so I'm just going to use it whenever I can. I don't have that information, whatever the case is. Is this device actually better than that device? All those type of things as well. Because you can also then measure your own interventions at that level. But then at a council level or, state level, like you said, at scale, all those things add up really quickly. And I think that's where you can get the most, you can see that real impact. You can see it, I might be able to see it individually, but then to see it on that grand scale is really, really important as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and it's obviously a trend that has existed overseas in terms of these kinds of solutions using behavioral science and marrying that up to hard data. Social norming as a part of those sort of nudges, doing something because your neighbors are doing something or performing at a certain level. So you should do it as well. We have a lot of those kinds of solutions in other areas where we're encouraging people to exercise and using sort of leaderboards and benchmarking yourself against people that are of a similar age. That kind of solution has sort of existed for a while that obviously nudges behaviors around certain topics. It's just around applying that similar level of behavioral science to things that we do within our home and how we sort of use our resources and ingraining a lot of those behaviors for us. And I think it's really exciting to sort of think into the future and see how, people in 10, 15, 20 years time actually going to be interacting with a lot of these things and interacting with their data. It's obviously going to be second nature to them, but, that's the exciting part of us is you're inventing the future.
Yes. Now, speaking of the future, I was going to zoom into the future and talk about emerging trends, but I just want to quickly check in. Is there any particular project you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned already before we go to the future?
I think for us, it's really a whole series of projects and consortiums that we're involved in where a lot of that relies on infrastructure. That data needs to come from somewhere. And we're seeing a real trend in terms of, smart metering, advanced metering infrastructure being deployed across Australian local government areas. And that includes sort of sensor data as well. But, we need that data to then wield it and power all these customer-facing solutions. So that's really the key trend that we're sort of starting to see is the value of the data. And, it goes back to the old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So that trend is the real exciting one in terms of the projects that we're involved with, in terms of these consortiums that involve telecommunications providers, meters, expert teams, obviously, such as Lu and Nucleus 3, along with ours. We're really all collaborating together to push things forward.
Yeah, one of the things, though, one of the project or number of projects is, especially across New Zealand and New South Wales, is depending on the geography, the terrain, the relationship between councils. We are seeing more councils coming together and going, how do we do this as a co-op and collectively together? And that might mean you have one technology, we have another technology, but all the data coming into the one central platform or location to allow for decision-making at a group level and an individual level is becoming more powerful. We're seeing that a lot happening now. And in the past, it was always every council thought they were uniquely different, but in reality, they've realised they're probably 95% the same or 90% the same, and they've got a few unique nuances that are specific to them. And we are seeing those councils now coming together and initiating programs that we're involved in that includes a number of different technology protocols that wouldn't traditionally not work together, but wouldn't traditionally be considered to be part of the same project. And now we're seeing, NB-IoT working with the ITRON mesh, or the LoRa network working with the Suez wires technology, and those technologies coming together to get data from different even locations within a territory of a council or a state of a water authority, to bringing back that data to make those decisions and drive those operational efficiencies around water operations and community. So that's where the biggest thing that we're seeing in a lot of our projects at the moment, Zoe.
Yeah, I love that. I think that smart regions approach is really important. I mean, obviously for scalability, but like you said, those common problems that all councils are having, why try and solve them all separately? Obviously, and then the context then shifts and changes depending on what we need. But the data then, the other thing is you could then compare across, like, okay, maybe this council, and from a water perspective, if we're thinking about that, we all just want to use it more effectively, more efficiently. We want to use our resources, best. I don't see that as a competitive kind of issue, like how many libraries do you have or something like that. It's like we all need water, right? And yeah, I guess the scalability of the technology to, buying at scale, value for money, those type of things. But then to be able to compare as well, it's like, oh, well, actually this area and this area are quite similar, but this one's using a lot more water. Why is that the case? And it might be a very good reason, or there might be a leak, or there might be something that's happening there that you could start to shift and nudge and change behaviour, or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah, because the other thing we're also noticing is then bringing, we're seeing it over in New Zealand, we're seeing it in Australia here also, is when you start bringing those communities and the councils together and led by that education, that expertise, they started to build it within their own community, specific to their community, specific to their program. Where in the past, they used to have this mentality of, we're only 1,000 customer water authority. No one wants to work with us. We don't have the expertise. Let's just continue doing it the way we're doing it. And what it's actually doing is it's commencing that digital journey for them from a knowledge point of view, attracting new people to the area, skill sets to the area. And it's not just, it's beyond the technology, even the project, that you're actually attracting, people and community and skill sets and new industry. And that's the stuff that's really powerful when you start looking at, that digital, interoperable customer engagement, leveraging data.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think talent attraction and retention is something beyond the technology, like you said, that smart communities can really bring. And I think it's we'll talk about trends. That's going to be it's not talked about enough. And I think particularly for local water authorities or councils, it's a necessity, because we know that you can basically live and work from anywhere, nearly, depending on, if you're a knowledge-based worker or whatever the case may be. So why do you want to live in that place? But then also we're seeing the opposite, where people are hyper-local as well, where they want to be in places that are progressive, that they can access anything at their fingertips, that, maybe they do want to, be able to go to the local cafe as well as work, in their high-tech job at the local council, whatever the case is. So talent retention and skill set development and all those type of things are just those. They're not, I wouldn't even call them they're not even byproducts. They are direct benefits of that approach, that digital transformation approach. So yeah, they're really key. Thanks for bringing that one up.
It's okay. So the one other thing there's a number of things, but the one thing that's really powerful at the moment now is we can ask David and I would ask you a question of the council, or the water authority, or the organisation. Say, outside of what you do, what's your biggest industry in your municipality or your area or your country town? And if it could be agriculture or transport or whatever they may tell us. And then we sort of pose a question: how can what we're doing here benefit that industry? And a lot of times we haven't thought of that. And we're like, why not bring, irrigation into the conversation with our farmers? Why not make, the technology that's available, that's being deployed in your network, available to your transport industry or to your livestock producers? And all of a sudden, the conversation expands to areas that they thought, wow, this is something we haven't considered, and we shouldn't be looking at a singular, granular council or a local government point of view, but we should be looking at it as a cross-industry or, even sometimes cross competitors, where you're fighting for the same bandwidth, but you want to do the benefit of an outcome So, that conversation does, or that question does, get a lot of quiet looks around the room, but the conversation then fires up after that, and they all of a sudden start finding use cases and applications to apply to.
It's a really good point, because it also, from both sides, it then opens up the door for, say, the farmers to join that conversation, whereas they might not have known that door existed, right? Or it was too hard, or they couldn't go to scale, whereas, maybe it is just an off branch of the council's network, or whatever the case is, we're talking about that. But yeah, it actually opens up that conversation for them as well, which, again, like we said, they're the community, they're the ones we're serving. So we want to open up as many doors as we can throughout that process, which the other thing, and we'll go back to I'm looking at the time, we better wrap up shortly. But in terms of bringing people to the table and opening up those conversations, I think that's what the smart community approach can do, no matter what project we're doing, because it's actually, the process is also innovative and unique and different. It's not just a normal project anymore, right? I mean, you still have to do the project management things and, watch your scope and time and all those things as well. But actually the process of how we're doing this has to be different. Therefore, you have different conversations. Therefore, you open up different doors, and therefore you learn stuff from just the process of doing this stuff as well, which I think is really key.
Absolutely.
Now, talking about the future, we've talked about a few future trends. Any other trends that we haven't mentioned yet that we want to add in?
Yeah, for me, working a lot with New Zealand and understanding the Maori or the First Nations or the Indigenous sensitivities and engagement in some of those projects, and the Kiwis have really embraced it in part of our projects of engaging their local community, and I think that's something that we're starting to see in Australia. Some councils in New South Wales are now talking to the First Nations about how to manage water better and how that can be better for technology. And it's such a beautiful and a powerful story when you're bringing in, aspects of the community to really help you drive a better technology project. It's not just about the technology, but about all aspects of things. That's something that's really being driven in the future. It's something that we are excited about participating in.
Yeah, I think that's a great one and really necessary as we move forward. But yeah, thinking about our First Nations people as the first technologists, right? The technology that they developed might not have been digital technology, but just technologies and methodologies and processes. But then, as we go, we build on those and we learn new things and we shift and change those. So it's really, really key.
It's also understanding the relationship and the behaviour towards that natural resource in water, for example, and how, what weirdly enough, what technology and what we do through technology, these communities have been doing it for thousands of years, and sort of applying those learnings into a potentially technology use case and a campaign that we can deploy using technology is really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. David, how about you? Future trends.
Yeah, future trends for me, I think it's just the way sort of the trajectory that the industry is really taking. One of the things that I spoke about earlier, future trends, I think, is getting away from the mentality, and as someone that has a great deal of experience in data science, getting away from the mentality of deploying something is enough. I think that kind of thinking was sort of very Web 1.0 or 2.0, is that we built a website and, we put a whole bunch of content on it and we ticked that box and we all went to the pub. I think that kind of mentality is very dated today. So future trends, I think, is everything is going to be measured and outcomes are going to be measured by people such as yourself, Zoe, when we're looking at data science. And we're really going to be focusing on hard data and how we can actually deliver outcomes and having the data actually to show that. And hopefully we can use that data to look at our failings and see where we can do better, where we can deliver better solutions. And it's that very iterative approach that as a technologist we use on a daily basis. And we'd love to see that applied across smart government and smart communities, because that's really what's going to push us forward as Australians and as humans.
Zoe, I think one more thing for me, and I wrote it down, is the security of the data. A lot of these councils, the sheer volume of data that smart metering and sensors and all things IoT and OT, start driving to these communities, to the organisations. A lot of them wouldn't have the experience dealing with the volume of data from going from 4 manual reads a year to potentially data every half an hour. Also helping those organisations and those local governmental entities manage, secure the data better and, ensuring that they're protected, I think will be a really important future thing that will happen in the future with around IoT.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important, and people thinking about that now and acting on it now as well. And you see that even within digital transformation, it's just like that next kind of iteration of, going to the cloud, but making sure it's secure where it is and asking those questions. And I think, like we talked about earlier, skill sets required to be able to make those decisions is also really key as well. And having those internally for a council or, an organisation is really important. Yeah, and I think then making decisions with that data too. If you can't store it, you can't make a decision with it. If it's not secure, there's so many things within that. And I think these are the next level conversations that are going to be so important. Well, they are now, right? We know, and these aren't new conversations. This isn't new. We know there are data-driven companies, private sector all around the world, and we know governments have a lot of data. So they have processes in place, but it's just that next level as we go on and up and up. Now, one last question, an easy one. Well, actually, first of all, it's been so great to have you both on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it really, when I have conversations like this about the future and where we're heading and just kind of G's me up again into the weekend. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and having these conversations. I love talking to people that are passionate about the space, but we're doing real work in this space as well. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this afternoon. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this. So I just have one last question, which is how can people connect with you?
For myself, they can connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me a message on LinkedIn, or they can send me an email at david@greenbee.com. And I answer every message and every email, I promise. Cross my heart.
Do better than me.
I'm the same as David. I have a zero inbox policy where every night I have to go to bed with not a single outstanding email in my inbox. So via LinkedIn or via Louis at nucleus3.com.au. And Zoe, absolute pleasure and really grateful and appreciative of the opportunity.
Thank you. And thanks, team, again for coming onto the podcast. I do look forward to our next conversation, and I look forward to hearing about the projects and things that you've been working on and that you're working on right now, and seeing the impact for those in the future too. So thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks. We'll say goodbye. Bye.
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 The Smart Community Podcast is brought to you by My Smart Community. If you're looking for support in podcast strategy and production, workshop design and facilitation, or communication and media advisory, get in touch. Email hello@mysmart.community or head to www.mysmart.community.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter at SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.